Zeteskians, welcome back to Azeroth. Today we tour Pandaria, riding on our thundering Argent Cloud Serpent. The architecture is inspired by ancient China, which, at the time of release, gave a lot of people a Kung Fu Panda vibe. I remember Cataclysm and Pandaria being mocked because they only increased the level cap by 5 instead of the usual 10 per expansion. The food and supply shortages caused by the Cataclysm plunged the Horde and Alliance back into war. This was exacerbated by Thrall giving up the mantle of War Chief to Garrosh, son of Grom Hellscream, who died fighting Manaroth to free the Orcs from the Demon Blood Pact during the events of Warcraft 3. Also in that game, we met Chen Stormstout, who makes his reappearance here on Pandaria. And we get to meet some of his family, including young Lily, who is involved with many of our quests here. Aside from the war, we also deal with the Shah of Pandaria, which are shadowy creatures linked to the old god, Yasharj. They are powered by negative emotions and can take over sentient beings on this island. The story of Emperor Xiaohao describes him becoming Zen and letting go of his negative emotions, allowing him and his people to live here without being infected. The timeline gets a bit confusing when you consider that the Titans tried to rip Yasharj out of Azeroth millions of years ago, but the Shah didn't seem to be an issue while the Mogu ruled over Pandaria and enslaved the Pandaren. Only after the Pandaren freed themselves did the Shah start becoming a problem. Perhaps this is explained by Yasharj slowly recovering, its various fleshy fragments reconnecting to each other over thousands or millions of years. Off the southern coast, another small island called the Timeless Isle exists. If you have heard of the frog farming exploit, this is where it happened. Players can't fly in this island, which is annoying, but I can give my mammoth heat exhaustion to carry us around. Rumor has it that there was once a currency of bloody coins which could be gathered from PvP or could be obtained by killing these infinitely and instantly respawning frogs on this isle. When Mists of Pandaria Remix was released a few years ago, the frogs became an exploit for gathering the currency to upgrade the Remix cloak, allowing some players to get godlike stats for a short period before the exploit was nerfed. Why didn't they think of this in the 10 years between the original Pandaria and the remix is a mystery. Furthermore, why they didn't want players to be overpowered for a limited time event is also a mystery. I tried playing Remix, but leveling and getting this upgrade currency felt slower than leveling the first time around. My gut feeling was later confirmed by some players with much more time on their hands. A big criticism at the time was having cosmetics and power use the same currency, so players had to choose between them. Also, for anyone who wasn't around during the first Pandaria expansion, there was a cloak that could be upgraded to allow players into the top part of the island to fight a boss. The quest to obtain the cloak was removed from the game And by the time I was exploring the continent, I was shocked to see that the boss icon was on the map and the achievements for killing it were still in the game, but there was no method for me to ever get the cloak. Putting that behind us, we can explore the southern part of the continent, where players can reunite with Nat Pagle and become his friend by bringing him rare fish. The rest of the fishermen around him have a separate reputation track with quests. Nearby, we meet the Jinyu, which are tall humanoid relatives of the Murlocs and Gorloks. There doesn't appear to be much lore behind them. I tried but couldn't find much. I think they were enslaved by the Mogu alongside the Pandaren, but I have no details on their society, culture, history, leadership, or affiliations. In the Valley of Four Winds, there is a farm that the player can upgrade and use to mass produce many of the vegetables needed for cooking recipes. Be prepared to spend months visiting this farm every day to max out your reputation with each of the members of the Tillers, and to gather enough of the vegetables to max out the various specializations within cooking. For some reason, many of the late game recipes require 50 or 100 carrots per meal, but each planting of carrots only returns about 5. Just be glad you don't have to wait months for the carrots to grow naturally. They are done one day after being planted and cared for. On the western side of the valley, we meet the mantid, an insectoid race which served the old gods and is eager to do so again. If you ever get the chance, please read Death from Above by Robert Brooks. It is a short story about 50 pages long about a mantid named Kilruck. Here are a few excerpts to tempt you. The strong will return, the weak will not, she said. Kilruck continued to drop rounds. It was oddly unsatisfying. He wanted to see the lesser creature's agony up close. He wanted to paint the battlements with their blood. Dropping bombs from so high felt too clean, too detached, and not terribly useful. By the second night of the cycle, most of Kilruck's flock had curled up from exhaustion underneath some of the larger kipari trees. Kilruck merely took another net of rounds and flew on without them. The strain of halting a dive from so high will rip his wings straight off his back. As I said, he practices constantly, said Klaxiva Pok. Yesterday, he could manage a drop of 10 strides. This morning, 15. That is hardly useful. Only this afternoon, 25 strides. Klaxiva Pok finished. The story is a sort of mix between Forrest Gump, Rocky, and also dealing with individuality within a semi hive mind. The western side of Pandaria is mostly controlled by the Mantid, and off the northern coast is the Isle of Thunder, which is a Mogu stronghold. The Isle of Thunder also does not allow flying. I think it would have been fun to allow flying, but if the player went too high when not near a taller structure, they could risk getting struck by lightning and dismounted midair. Instead, we are confronted with impassable steps that visually appear shorter than our mount, but which we cannot possibly climb or jump over, so we must find another way around. The pterodax creatures here will make a reappearance in Zandalar when we get to that island in another video. I'm told there is a method to get a jump or climbing skill on this island to be able to get to the top of some of the Rocky Mountains and obtain pieces of a Mogu statue. I think it was something about lizard people who teach you to grip the rocks, but I've never been able to encounter them, despite combing every inch of walkable terrain on the island for many days. Alas, the downside of rare spawns. If only someone had the forethought for rare spawns to be optional instead of being required to unlock other abilities. Cough, cough, Shadowlands flying, cough, cough. Another small island off the northern coast of Pandaria also doesn't allow flying. The Isle of Giants, home to dinosaurs. There is a small cave on the island where you can trade dinosaur bones for a mount, but it takes a lot of bones. If you want to see some jank, just sit around under one of the big T Rexes while it walks around. The animation is even more poorly matched to the movement than it was for dinosaurs in Ungoro Crater in Classic. It is times like this when I wish World of Warcraft would have slowed down with the expansions. Maybe one every 5 years instead of every 2 years. If the game was more polished and more fun, I think the core audience of 30 to 40-year-old men might be willing to shell out $100 every 5 years, plus the subscription price. When you think about what features and benefits each expansion provides, Pandaria is the first really weak link. The base game provided 2 continents, dozens of zones, the first 8 playable races, and 9 playable classes, 60 levels, 9 professions, 3 secondary professions, dungeons, and raids. Burning Crusade brought in flying, a new continent, 10 more levels, 2 new races, a new profession, and set the standard for all expansions going forward. Wrath of the Lich King brought in a new continent, pet battles, heirloom items, a new player class, achievements, a new profession, and 10 more levels. Cataclysm brought flying to the old world, redoing the map, added 2 new races, a bunch of new zones that weren't exactly a continent, but if you add them together, are about the size of a continent. A new secondary profession, but only 5 new levels. This was the beginning of the decline. Pandaria added 1 new race and class, and a new continent, and only 5 new levels. Warlords of Draenor added a new continent, 10 new levels, garrisons, and mission boards. Legion added a new class, 2 continents, allied races, 10 new levels, more mission boards, and level scaling. Battle for Azeroth added 2 continents plus some extra zones, redid some of the classic / cataclysm zones, added more allied races, introduced a time traveling mechanic to see old and new versions of maps, more mission boards, and 10 new levels. Shadowlands added a new continent, covenants, a new reputation system, a level squish, more mission boards, and Torghast, otherwise known as roguelike dungeons. Dragonflight added a new continent, class, race, new flight system, NPC dungeons, and 10 levels. War Within added a new continent, solo dungeons, warband bank, new allied race, and 10 levels. I got off on a rant there, but that's okay. There isn't much to see in Pandaria other than the Mantid, which I actually enjoy. The next 2 weeks are more Dungeons and Dragons videos. Subscribe if you want to see more, and let me know in the comments if you have any suggestions.